You trundle down the aisle, your eyes wide and your stomach craving. Every glance at the shelves is a flash of nostalgia, a reminder of commercials that once glued you to the TV. Your cart fills effortlessly, guided not by choice but by decades of subtle influence. Surrounded by a towering wall of familiar logos, amazed by a cornucopia of colorful packages, it feels like a shopper's paradise. But it's not. What looks like endless freedom is a cleverly crafted illusion of choice. Almost every item you'll toss into your cart is owned by just 4 or 5 giant corporations. In the United States alone, these behemoths dictate what's on your table. And on a global scale, the stranglehold is even tighter. 10 companies control more than half of the world's food and beverage supply. How did this happen? And does it matter for regular folks like us? That's what we'll find out on this episode of The Infographics Show. The companies that secretly decide what you eat. You are what you eat. It's a phrase we've all heard. It originates from Anselme Briand-Savarin, a French lawyer and nutritionist who wrote in his 1826 book, The Physiology of Taste, "Tell me what you eat and I will tell you what you are." The fate of a nation, he explains, depends on the way that they eat. If that's true for Americans, well, Houston, we have a major problem. It's believed that ultra-processed foods, or UPFs, dominate our diets. These are products loaded with unrecognizable additives, ingredients that often make the food look and taste nothing like what it started as. UPFs make up about 60% of the average American adult diet, and 70% of what kids consume daily. It might depend on where you live and how much cash you have at your disposal, because if you tick certain boxes, it could be 90% of your diet. It's pushed onto you daily like a legal addiction. Your brain, hardwired for survival, lights up with dopamine blasts from the heavy doses of carbs, salt, and sugar packed into these foods. It's not your fault. These ultra-processed foods are designed to hijack your cravings, keeping you coming back for more day after day. The food giants know what they peddle isn't always good for us, but they still spend about $14 billion each year on advertising in the US alone. About 80% of those stomach-rumbling ads promote this culinary crack and keep you hooked. A 2017-2018 study revealed that 42% of American adults are currently obese, a rate projected to go up to 50% by 2030. 6 in 10 U.S. adults, according to a recent study, routinely eat foods that increase the risk of chronic conditions like heart disease and cancer. However, some people don't have much of a choice. Around 19 million Americans live in food deserts, or low-income, low-access areas where getting to a grocery store is a challenge. And even when they manage to get there, the nutrient-rich good stuff is often scarce or out of reach. Even if you don't live in a food desert, your options aren't always as great as they seem. It's not just in the US. Europe's leading UPF consumer, the UK, is home to adults whose diet is about 60% UPFs, 65% for children, although the stats differ depending on where you look for them. And like in the US, how much cash you have matters a lot. A recent Food Foundation report said per calorie, cheap food in the UK is half as expensive. For the poorest 20% of British households, meeting national healthy diet recommendations would require spending half of their disposable income on food, something that isn't going to happen. This is one of the reasons why UK scientists have talked about a dismal and jaw-dropping low life expectancy in deprived areas where, like in the US, lower wage earners and the poor get sicker at a younger age, and they clock out of life faster. Processing food in and of itself isn't a bad thing. When Henry VIII said he wanted smoked eel with some pickles, he got processed eel and processed vegetables. It still tasted like eel, and his veg was tangy just how he liked it. But today, if you bought a box of frozen chicken and pasta with sauce, it would be filled with imposters. Sure, there might be some chicken or maybe some mechanically separated chicken or chicken byproducts, but there would also be additives for flavor, preservation, texture, and color. Much of what you buy in your grocery store contains these added properties. So we've been processing food for millennia, but it's the ultra part that is problematic. When a large portion of your plate is made up of colorings, bulking agents, flavor enhancers, cheap sweeteners, trans fats, emulsifiers, acidulants, fortified nutrients, gases, hydrolyzed protein isolates, and anti-foaming agents, humectants or moisture reduction agents, and who knows what else the food industry's alchemists have concocted, it's not food anymore. But it's all in there to make it taste better, last longer, and most importantly, cost less. Our modern UPF-laden diet is why we've seen such huge, and we mean huge, increases in obesity and obesity-related diseases like diabetes. The modern diet is said to be behind the rise of heart disease, and certain cancers. Heart disease in the US at the start of the 20th century wasn't common at all, and now it is the leading cause of death. Why? Well, trans fats haven't helped, and neither have sweeteners or many of the questionable additives that we encounter daily. A lot of these ingredients sit uncomfortably on the "we think it's safe to eat but not everyone does" list. So let's delve deeper into who controls all these mega-processed items that line the aisles of your local supermarket. Well, we say local, but things have changed. Up until around the 1980s and 90s, many Americans bought their groceries from small outlets, local grocery stores, butchers, and bakers where mom and pop were the CEOs. Now, 65% of the U.S. grocery market is controlled by 4 companies: Walmart, Costco, Kroger, and Ahold Delhaize. These can keep costs down by buying in bulk from global companies who have mechanized and at times compromised the integrity of the food-making process. So, your cart is piled high, full of goods, and to you it looks like you've been buying food from lots of different companies. You haven't, not really. In a study by The Guardian, researchers bought 61 types of popular groceries from a major supermarket in America. 4 or fewer firms controlled at least 50% of the market for 79% of the items. It's these companies, the food monopolies, who dictate what farmers grow and what you eat. If you're a breakfast cereal fan, well, you're in good company. Over 283 million Americans said they bought cereal, according to the U.S. 2020 census data and the Simmons National Consumer Survey. But despite all the choices you think you're getting, there's a good chance you are buying from one of 3 companies: Kellogg's, General Mills, or Post Holdings. You might not have even heard of that last company, the guys that make Weetabix, Alpen, Ready Brek, Raisin Bran, and the classic Honey Bunches of Oats. And for that last one, sure, you get oats, you get honey, but you also get lots of corn syrup, artificial flavors, oil, coloring, and a controversial preservative we'll talk about later, BHT, or butylated hydroxytoluene. Now, maybe you want bread. Well, despite all the brands you see, over 50% of all the market is controlled by 2 companies: Grupo Bimbo and Flowers Foods. Grupo what, we hear you ask? But it's behind 100 brands and 13,000 products. Or maybe you want some packaged rice or pasta. If it's the latter, well, you're buying from Berea. Or Ebro Foods. Ebro is also behind over 22% of the rice you buy, followed by Mars and Unilever. As for soft drinks, well, we're sure you're already aware you're buying from pretty much 3 companies: Coca-Cola, PepsiCo, or Keurig Dr. Pepper. Each of them experts at marketing. They also control most of the juice market, although Kraft Heinz has an almost 10% market share of that. As for beer, Anheuser-Busch, the owners of Budweiser, Stella Artois, and Michelob, has almost a 42% market share, and Molson Coors just over 24%. Okay, so what about ready meals, the dry ones with meat? Well, if that's your food of choice, Conagra Brands is the biggest supplier. It has almost a 60% market share. You name it, Conagra does it. From making Bertolli olive oil and Chef Boyardee pasta, to healthy choice meals and countless other products like TV dinners and sauces, to whips, dips, snacks, processed meat, popcorn, and pizzas. If it's on your plate, there's a good chance Conagra had a hand in making it. Kraft Heinz, General Mills, and the Campbell Soup Company are also big players in the single-serving meal market. If you want frozen pizza, Nestle is your master, with a 40% market share. It's also doing well in the baby food business, with a 24% market share, but after Abbott Laboratories and Reckitt Benckiser. Dips, that's over 87% PepsiCo. Unilever has around 50% of the market share of mayo, and Kraft Heinz comes in at 30%. Chocolate, 41.5% Hershey, and over 27% Mars. Yogurt, that's 33% Danone. Sour cream, almost 52% Daisy. Cheese slices, well, you can guess, are around 65% Kraft Heinz, and it also does okay in the bacon business with over 18%. As for the meat masters, Tyson is huge, but behind Brazil's JBS on a global scale. The WH Group from China is also doing well in the meat department. So we think you get the picture. The food giants supply most of what you eat. They spent about $175 million in 2020 on lobbying and keeping politicians sweet, and over the years they have been merging, so getting bigger. In the 1980s, the pork and beef behemoths controlled just less than 40% of the respective markets. But with mergers, now over 80% of beef and about 70% of pork is controlled by the giants. Like processing in and of itself, this isn't always a bad thing. You get cheaper products because they're being made at a scale that would be mind-boggling to someone 50 years ago. At the start of the 20th century, malnutrition affected 20 to 30% of the population in the U.S.'s most impoverished areas. Nowadays, you rarely hear about Americans starving. The problem is, they might look like kings of full fridges, but their calorie-dense diets don't always provide enough nutrients. Still, the world has come a long way. Most of us can afford to eat something, and that's thanks in part to the fact that food on our plates came out of an industrial process. One of the negative consequences is that farmers are struggling. Livestock farmers in the U.S. will very likely work for the Big Four: Tyson, JBS, Cargill, or the National Beef Packing Company. They dictate the prices, and it seems the prices aren't great, which is why Time magazine in 2019 said American farmers are nearing extinction. The article explained the nation lost more than 100,000 farms between 2011 and 2018, 12,000 of those between 2017 and 2018 alone. One of the reasons is globalization, giant global food firms offering competitive prices. For a farmer to compete, they might have to pay lower wages. Of the 2.5 million farm laborers in the U.S., anywhere from 50 to 75% are low-paid and undocumented. Only about 15 cents of every dollar you spend at the grocery store goes to the farmer. Meanwhile, the food giants are making record-breaking profits. We won't go into all the company's revenues, but suffice it to say, they are making many billions each year thanks to their control of the market. Raj Patel, an academic and author, told The Guardian, "This is at the heart of capitalist food politics. Big corporations taking as much as they can and paying as little as possible for it." These critics of the food system partly blame mergers and acquisitions. Companies merge and they consolidate, buying out the competition. Take the seed market, for example. 25 years ago, 10 corporations controlled about 40% of the market. But after a series of acquisitions, just 4 companies now control over half of it: Bayer, Corteva, Syngenta, and BASF. They also control over 60% of the agrochemical market. They tell farmers what to plant, which means less biodiversity and fewer nutrients for you, the consumer. One of the most controversial corporate mergers in recent history came when American agrochemical giant Monsanto was acquired by German pharmaceutical and biotechnology powerhouse Bayer. The U.S. Justice Department said the merger would likely result in hundreds of millions of dollars per year in harm, raising costs to farmers and consumers. Now, one firm pretty much controls the world's supply of seeds and pesticides. Monsanto Bayer controls about 80% of U.S. corn production. This corn is used to sweeten processed foods for humans when it's turned into corn syrup. It keeps livestock full in the form of high-energy feed, so you can fill up on meat products. Farmers sign contracts to buy genetically modified seeds that are resistant to herbicides that are also sold by Bayer. The farmers agree to not save seeds for next year's planting season. Well, they don't have much choice but to agree. These big seed companies aggressively protect their IP rights, which leads to less innovation and research, further bolstering their monopoly. They launch lawsuits for patent infringement against any farmers trying to get around this, so we, the consumers, get what Bayer wants the farmers to grow and what the big food companies can make the most money from. It's a bit more complicated, but this is a major reason why we eat what we eat. You also have the big firms that process the corn, turning it into high-fructose corn syrup or HFCS, animal feed, and ethanol. A few companies own that too. Together, ADM, Bunge, Cargill, Cofco, and the Louis Dreyfus Company have an 80% market share. And it's not just for corn, but for soy, grain, and sugar. Some firms like Tyson control the process from start to finish, what's being called vertically integrated. This means they sell the seeds that feed the animals that make their sausages. When food is made by giants, we get factory farming. In the U.S., the days of small farmers farming the old way have been coming to an end. All added up, the U.S. is home to about 1.7 billion factory farm animals, a 50% increase over the last 20 years. A 2019 study revealed the overwhelming dominance of factory farming in America's meat supply. An astonishing 99.9% of the nearly 9 billion chickens, 98% of the 71 million pigs, 70% of the 94 million cows, and 99.8% of the 216 million turkeys are raised on factory farms. If we add up how much collective pooping they do, this is a very rough estimate. That's about 343 million tons of chicken caca, 82.5 million tons of pig poop, 1.1 billion tons of cow crap, and 1.5 million tons of turkey tots. That's about 1.53 billion tons of excrement per year, which can contaminate waterways and could create dead zones where you wouldn't want to have a picnic. Not long ago, beaches in Florida were said to have been covered in green slime thanks in part to our contaminated waterways, and a dead zone in the Gulf of America, formerly known as the Gulf of Mexico, was partly blamed on big food. The smaller farmers who might be better equipped to turn animal waste into natural fertilizer have mostly been priced out of the game. This is depressingly evident with the very high rates of American farmers deciding to retire early into that great field in the sky. Of course, as a consumer, you'd probably prefer to enjoy a bacon double cheeseburger, knowing the pig, cow, and chicken that laid the egg for the mayo didn't endure a life so grim that it would make Guantanamo Bay seem like a 5-star hotel. Most people make choices based on cost-effectiveness, even if it comes at a price. Poor conditions for animals, low wages for laborers and farmers, soil erosion from monoculture farming, and more additives in products you already suspect aren't good for you. In 2015, a study showed that over the previous 50 years or so, the number of food additives in our food supply has risen from 800 to over 10,000, and the FDA is still playing catch-up. These additives might have been passed off as generally recognized as safe to humans, but it appears that that is sometimes a dubious statement. When regulations fall short, disasters can happen. Like in 2022, when people ate Daly's Harvest French lentil and leek crumbles. It contained a compound in an ingredient called tyraflower that put over 100 people in the hospital, some with severe symptoms including liver injuries. The compound at fault wasn't even in the FDA's database. NPR, when writing about the topic, said companies regularly introduce new additives without ever informing the FDA. When food is made on such a massive scale, corners are sometimes cut, which is why in the USA, for years, there were no warnings on foods that contained partially hydrogenated oils, a type of trans fat. They gave products such as chips, deep-fried stuff, and baked goods a better texture and a longer shelf life. But they've also been proven to increase the risk of heart disease, stroke, and type 2 diabetes. We also know that high-fructose corn syrup, HFCS, is not good for us. Yet it is everywhere. In cereal, candy, soft drinks, condiments, fast food, canned food, baked goods, yogurt, and even in products you would never expect. It's one of the many drivers behind the rise in obesity and related diseases. And it's all over your grocery store shelves. A quick glance at the small print on the back of most products will reveal just how widespread it really is. The Food Institute in 2024 said some politicians are fighting back, stating its detractors claim high-fructose corn syrup is even more pernicious than table sugar in the battle against the obesity epidemic and related metabolic disorders. In 1999, Americans consumed about 63.7 pounds of HFCS per person per year. That went down to 59 pounds in 2005, and in 2023 it was about 53 pounds per year on average. This is better, but we still eat too much of it. The fructose from the high-fructose corn syrup, or the regular table sugar, is harder to metabolize than glucose. It overwhelms the liver, so it can cause non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, or get released into your bloodstream in the form of triglycerides. This is a major reason for our fatter-on-average bodies and the increase in cardiovascular disease. But it is cost-effective, tasty, and good for shelf life. It looks good when you pick up a product and it says low-fat or fat-free, but that often just means it is loaded with HFCS. Then you have all the colorings which make the ultra-processed food we eat look nice. They've been linked to negative health outcomes, possibly, and we emphasize possibly, ADHD and cancer. Research is limited, but if we are what we eat, do we really want to have a diet that consists of daily helpings of red 40, yellow 5, and yellow 6? Artificial food dye consumption has increased by 500% in the last 50 years, and it's kids who seem to eat the most of it. Some of the dyes are banned in some countries but not in others, like green number 3, banned in Europe but okay in the USA. Some countries like the UK issue warnings on products containing food dyes, citing studies that link these dyes to hyperactivity and other negative psychological effects. To prevent spoilage, additives like BHA and BHT are commonly used. They're found in meats, cereals, baked goods, beer, potato chips, and countless other items we eat regularly. Are they safe? The answer is maybe, or maybe not. Some countries have banned them because of links to cancer and other health issues, and the US is not one of them. The EU is much more careful, banning ingredients even if danger is not always clear. In the US, you might find bans at the state level, such as in California, which in 2023 outlawed brominated vegetable oil, red dye number 3, propylparaben, and potassium bromate. Other states might follow, but the big food companies might have something to say about this in the way of lobbying efforts and political donations. Another thing is, the FDA has a voluntary system in which companies state if an ingredient is generally recognized as safe, but, well, maybe their scientists give too many green lights to new, strange ingredients. The FDA, say the experts, would need more funding to do the job itself. With American health outcomes being simply atrocious, that might soon happen. As synthetic drugs flood the streets due to their low production costs, synthetic food is filling our plates for the same reason. Because legal food companies can cut costs. And when our diets make us sick, Big Pharma steps in to pick up the pieces. It's no coincidence that poor eating habits are a major driver of why so many people rely on medication. According to the Health Policy Institute in 2021, 66% of Americans were on prescription drugs that year. Many of the conditions could likely have been avoided with a better diet, which is good for the mind as well as the body. As they used to say in the 1980s, people should just say no to ultra-processed products. When you are constantly broke and your brain craves a hit of something that for a short time will make you feel better. It's easier said than done because sometimes you simply don't have many options. But food is medicine. We really are what we eat, so we need more affordable choices. Did you know just a handful of companies control so much of what we eat? Share your thoughts in the comments. Now you should watch this deep dive video, Why the CIA Hired Nazis, or have a look at this video instead.